Well, we're here in Edinburgh, in Scotland, and Maria, where exactly are we standing and what's behind us?
We're standing in what could be a car park, but is in fact the Collective on Calton Hill in Edinburgh. This is the Parthenon, I believe. Am I correct, Iain?
The National Monument.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
The little nickname.
Isn't it a monument to Nelson?
No, that's that one, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah, that's
okay.
the telescope. Yeah.
Oh, so it's not to do with war then?
So we're none of us are sure.
I'm
apparently.
really glad all the locals have a reverential attitude toward. We have Leanne Browne here with us, and Laynie Browne, and Irene Torra Mohedano, and Sophia DuRose, and Christie Williamson. Hello, Christie, who traveled from Glasgow to join us, and Tessa Berring, and Jane Goldman, and Colin Hurd and Maria Sledmere, back to them in a second, and Iain Morrison, yay! Who is warm.
Yes, I know.
You're cold as a feeling, but you're warm as a body next to mine. So Maria and Colin have collaborated on Cocoa and Nothing, and I'm going to ask Zach, who is, the meta filmic reference of a person whom you can't see because he's behind the camera, to take a close look at the book. They're both holding up copies of it. It's adorable. Totally adorable. And what we're going to do is ask them in some collaborative or non-collaborative fashion to read the epigraphs and then two poems from the book. The first one is called Chocolate Brownie, and the second one is called Cherry and Almond. And then we're going to talk about it in some, chocolatey way. So, Maria, Colin, take it any way you want.
Okay. This is the epigraph from Benedict Mayer. Poetry is as good as chocolate. Chocolate is as good as poetry.
Some float off on chocolate bars, some on drink. Harmless, happy, soft of heart. Lorene Niedecker.
The square is a living, regal infant. Casimir Malevich. So the first poem in the book is called Chocolate Brownie. Spotless emotional moment. The athleticism of shame emulation. Aluminium foil for chocolate minotaur. Embrace your inner carb. Codependency with Hazel is totally nuts. Melt in your mouth mordants. She's a real ice cracker. Lyrical espalier for social climbers. At the end of the gummy labyrinth, a great baking powder for raising the dead. Now you can marinate in the gelatin garden or imagine glum orrery of planetary ganache linked by rocky road to the underworld. Infernal marshmallow of the flesh scaffold served by pumpkin mompreneurs. Ordering superphosphates from the darknet, try greed and blame for ryegrass. You are such a cute bean. Take a little ice bath in the compotia of my dreams, then dry off. Unsnack yourself from the tiny golden door. There's a lot to get done. The Charleston of candy wrappers and so on. How does that sound? I'm excited to finally get started. Oh, crackler of cloud biscotti. Can't wait to hear what yous are all bringing for sure. Until then, have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the sugar moon. Enjoy the sun, such a pill. And have a great chocolate.
Woo!
Yeah.
Cherry and almond. Cherry bomb, cherry hench, cherry memento, cherry melts in cherry, blonde, cherry, a changeling, cherry glazer, cherry bonfire, cherry leather, cherry melody, tremor charm, habit for jam, cherry crush, cherry aspirin, dragging a red chair through gender confetti, marzipan, red meats, cherry weary, cherry wedge, almond hard, smouldering, cherry boy, blossom, cherry buzz, cherry loco, cherry salute, cherry silicate, popped my cherry, lost cherry scars, heavy, heavy, cherry 11, cherry heaven, cherry says cherry is a fist, cherry is a chilblain, cherry baby, cherry pop, cherry on top.
Woo! Yeah.
Jane Goldman, because you are always ready. Pick either poem, doesn't matter, and just say something to get us started, and then we'll ask Tessa to follow up.
Well, I love I think it's a Scotticism, popping one's cherry. If somebody pops your cherry, it means takes your virginity.
It's an Americanism too.
Oh,
I think.
is it?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe
did we get it from? Did we get it from
Pie.
them?
I don't know. That's where.
Yeah. Anyway, I just see cherry as this wonderful sexual imagery that won't settle in either gender and is somehow just deliciously about physical pleasure. I know it's supposed to be a chocolate bar, but maybe it's always already a metaphor for something else. That's all I'm going to say.
Tessa, you want to take it from there, and then Christie?
Yeah, it's just exciting how we've moved from the Antarctic landscape over there to the chocolate landscape here, and but yet they feel like they have a relationship. And we've moved from the interplanetary crockery to the interplanetary ganache, and it's just so melty and delicious, and
As language.
yeah, as language, it's great.
Love that. Christie, and then Sophia.
So, I mean, the line that immediately jumps out to me is codependency with Hazel is totally nuts.
Why is that so charming?
Well, I mean, I'm married to Hazel Frew, and a poet who, I don't get why codependency gets such a bad rep, to be honest. Like, I mean, we're all interdependent. It's it just is how it is. Yeah, but the whole the way in both poems the sweetness and the lusciousness of the language and the flavours that just that pour through are delicious and delightful.
That's wonderful. Sophia, you of course are welcome and invited to say anything you want, but I would love to add a question that you or others can respond to, which is, how do we deduce from the poems themselves what the collaboration was like? How was there a compositional? Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I have some guesses, and I bet Iain will have a guess. But we'll start with Sophia, and then we'll turn to Iain.
Okay, I'm not going to answer. When reading Cherry and Almond, I was like, "Where's the almond?" Because there's cherry everywhere. But then I was thinking a little bit more, and like cherry and almond go together in a lot of recipes because they have this natural affinity for each other, and they're from like the same family with like a lot of stone fruit. Yeah, and so it made me think about like the idiomatic like affinity for pairs, and how a lot of idioms are like pairs of words, and language is often paired over and over again because of some like affinity for each other, like language's affinity for itself, which I thought was cool, which might speak a little bit to the collaboration on like a personal level, I guess. So I did answer your question.
Iain Morrison.
So I feel...
Preach.
Yeah, okay. I might be wrong, and I'm wondering how much it's being suggested by the fact that I heard both of you reading Maria the first poem and Colin the second, but I do feel like this is a sequence of alternates, bringing different voices into the same kind of ballpark, if you like. I feel like the first voice, which in my head feels like it's maybe Maria's voice, is kind of totally at ease with this enmeshedness within the Capitalocene, or is it? And I love the way that Maria presents this kind of languor, which, you know, if I'm right, and it is her, you know, you kind of get lulled into thinking, oh great, we're relaxing, we're in a car driving along, the radio is on, it's advertising something, this is all great. But it's the very relaxedness of the tone that kind of strikes a note of plangent unease underneath it about what we're all complicit with. And I feel like the other poem is much more of a kind of staccato formal approach, and is sort of applying the poem like a drill, the process like a drill, to see what it throws up. And I love that everything is kaleidoscoped through this chocolate, whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, whether it's the Anthropocene, it's all kind of like being hammered, and these poets are capable of fixing their gaze on any subject, no matter how small or apparently innocent or beguiling, and finding everything in it.
Wow, that was marvelous. Thank you. Irene, take it anywhere you like to go.
Yeah, I really love this idea of making poetry edible. I really felt like, I don't know about the creative process, but I can imagine you like just reciting and eating and talking, and there is all this orality in both in language and these sugary foods and the sensuality on it also. Yeah, there's something very, very edible and very flavored to me.
Laynie and Leanne, I'm sure you had something to say, but I'm going to subvert it by just asking a question. What does the epigraph from Bernadette Mayer, poetry is as good as chocolate, chocolate is as good as poetry, have to do with what these two poets have written?
I'm going to start.
Well, go for it if you have something.
Homes for immediate consumption. I mean, there's always food in a lot of Bernadette's poems. But I also think about the title, Cocoa and Nothing, which I love so much. But sugar as a drug of choice. It calls the question kind of like, how do we language our addictions, the pleasure and the problem in that line, a great baking powder for raising the dead. I feel like there's this attempt to kind of wake up with the poetry and with the orality and with the pleasure.
I think of the sonnetness-ish of the first poem and the sort of skeltonic verse of the second, and how chocolate comes in different forms and like these little squares, and the kids consuming the chocolate during the poetry reading that she alludes to in her sonnet. And I think of this ecstatic odes in different forms, and they're very much engaged with the forms of poetry as well as the taste. And I feel like they're eating the chocolate as they're writing. Yeah.
Bernadette's attitude toward the poetry reading as a format was, well, she had her kids with her, right? Am I getting this right? And when the poetry reading was long or boring, it was a double chocolate poetry reading because she had to. So basically, Bernadette's attitude was, don't you realize, and yours too, when I first met you, you had your child with you, and that was like a thing for you, and the whole point was a poetry reading is about not just a sonnet in the fancy sense of it, but what we do as poets in order to be with each other. We have to satisfy our kids. Everything is bribe, exactly, which seems to me, and I can turn to the two of you now, it seems to me a great attitudinal cue about the fun, the pleasure, and realizing that poetry and chocolate and poetry, it's all so scrumptious and delicious and like mouth-watering, and that's what poetry should be, so let's go at it. How are we doing with that? And I invite the two of you to talk about the collaboration.
Yeah, so the whole collection sort of came about via kind of a sort of bribe from Maria, which was I wasn't really writing very much, and I wasn't writing very much poetry at all, but I was becoming like obsessed with Ritter Sport chocolate to the point that it was the only thing I could think of. I would drive around and I would have a kind of mental map of where you could get Ritter Sport around Glasgow. And then I also did a thing where I ordered every single variety you could possibly get just to have it in my fridge as a sort of archive of Ritter Sport. And the idea was I wouldn't actually touch it because I would have them all. I wouldn't think about it so much because I would know that at any point I could have any of the flavors possible, and it was there in my fridge.
I just have to ask you a question about this. So you're describing an obsession, a controlled obsession, because you've got to, okay. And it was a response to your own comment about how you were hitting a rough patch in your writing poetry. So I'm asking you psycho-emotionally, if you want, to connect those two.
Yeah. I think I was also obsessed with other things at that time as well, like running mainly. But I think they are connected for sure. But the way that Maria bribed me is she bought me a Ritter Sport chocolate bar. She gave it to me at a reading we were at together, and she said, and I said thank you. And then she said, but now there's a kind of catch, which is you now owe me a poem. And then we just started exchanging. So we moved to sort of the digital realm, and we just send a kind of digital image of a Ritter Sport bar, but we would swap flavors that way. Mm-hmm. And that was how. So Iain is right, we alternated poems. The thing you're wrong about is both of these poems are Maria's.
Reveal.
What? Jane, comment on, I do want to turn to Maria, but comment on this gesture. It's friendship and love in the poetry community, people appreciating each other, and then one poet motivating the other, triangulating with Bernadette's model of bribing with chocolate into poetry. And you know these people, so say what you wish.
And I've collaborated with both of them. In fact, every poet here, apart from Christie, we must put that.
Not yet.
We must put that
Do you
right.
have a chocolate bar for him? Maybe it'll happen.
Well, we have similar things. We have the moon between us. We have Gemini between us. This is what poetry is all about. I think in this particular group of poets in the heartland of Scotland, that's what we like to do. So I do say that although Colin is saying Maria wrote both poems, when I read this, Maria is channeling Colin's aesthetics here. Colin is famous for these long I do this, I do that, skeletal, lush poems. I read them all the time by Colin. And marzipan, red meats, cherry weary, cherry wedge, almond hard, smouldering, cherry boy, blossom, cherry buzz. I would say that.
I don't do that, and I don't do this.
He does do that, and he does do this. He does do cherry.
That's you to turn him on that.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
Maria?
There's a poem in the book called Choco and Weed, which is one of Colin's, which is kind of like a twin poem in a way, in that it's actually after.
Is it Colin doing you?
Well, no, but it's the DuRose and guitar thing. But like it's a kind of like it's actually after Sylvia Legree, like in this poem. But there's a kind of iterative. But it was kind of funny when those two are the ones you picked, because it was like. A lot of the time when I'm rereading these, I kind of forget which ones are whose. There's some that are distinctively a Colin poem or Maria poem. Usually someone will be like, yeah, it's like a word like languorous, like, oh, that's definitely a Maria poem. But then there's one about running, that's definitely a Colin poem. So we have this dialectic of like, I'm the sleep poet, Colin's the athletic poet, and chocolate is like an energy dense food that's kind of on the one hand meant to be good for you, and like it's like good for you or whatever. I don't want to make flagrant health claims, but it's also like, yeah, it's a kind of poison and cure, right? And so there's something about chocolate as a way that combines our energies. And I like someone used the phrase like melty, I think it was Tessa, because it did feel a bit like our voices were melting into each other sometimes, and part of that was from the back and forth of doing it as an exchange.
And sorry.
Go ahead,
No, we want to do a meltdown edition where we melt down all the language in the poem into sort of one block.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I want to, since a lot of the poets here are standing here do collaborations, but since Leanne and Iain are freshest from a collaboration, now I'm not asking you to describe the collaboration, but I want to ask each of you to theorize is probably too strong a word, but to say something large about the thing that Maria was observing, which is that when Laynie Browne, and it should be acknowledged, was the curator of this enterprise here, picking the poems. Thank you, Laynie. Maria's comment was, when I go back to the book and you ask me to think about a poem, I go back and I don't even know who wrote it. And that is the collaborationness that I think needs to be put into the record in this video. What are two poets or more doing when they agree to suppress their own individual style into that of a friend or admired one? What's going on there? Why is it good? Why is it important? Why is this necessary?
Last night was great because we were on the dance floor and he said, "Do you want to do a poem?" And he handed me the phone and we were dancing together. So it was like back and forth, and like we said we'd do every other line, but then we started doing 2 and 3 lines each, and we kept going, and it was like, and they weren't all line breaks; they were like intermixing, like dancing, So it was like a communal. We were part of this bigger group, but we were like doing something with each other.
Yeah, I think I suggested it in a kind of like, oh my god, I'm standing next to Leanne Browne. I've always loved your poems written in environments of like different bodily experience, and I was like, well, here we are. Let's do this. And then as soon as I suggested it, I immediately felt shy. I was like, oh, because of course to do this is like a huge intimacy. So even in this room with all this noise and dancing going on, the kind of reveal of each other to the other person, and you're always sort of trying to learn to trust and not second guess what you think the other person's going to want to hear, and try and find some sort of middle balance. And I loved reading back what we wrote afterwards, because it felt like it wasn't something that I would have written, and I don't know how you felt about it.
like a third voice or like bigger,
Or what? I mean, Christie and Laynie just would love to hear your thoughts on this. The suppressing of the individual poet style or mode, which is, of course, I don't know, 300 or 400 years old, maybe 500 years old. But before that, there were probably more communitarian and collective concepts. Sure. Yeah. So this is getting back to an essence of poetry. So let's talk about why it's important now in contemporary poetry for poets to do this. I mean, I think of what Maria did for Colin. I just heard it for the first time, but as a kind of support. A support, a kind of life support in a way. So, Christie, Laynie, thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a kind of therapy, and I definitely think poetry therapy and chocolate therapy are both to be commended. But also, it's like it's people like in society today, people are disconnected, and poetry is a way for people to connect with one another. Communities like the Modpo community are ways for people to connect with one another, and by writing things together, then you put the we before the me. I don't know if that's a thing people say.
Yeah, I think it's a way to keep going. It's a way to build friendship, and Leanne and I collaborate all the time. Sometimes we do parallel play. We give each other prompts. It's a way also to discover new spark energy, just as the way that Bernadette's experiments kind of spark one to find new territory. When you're working collectively with one or more people, something new happens. And it gets us out of our own mind space into a more collective, open, experimental, connected space.
I would like to invite Irene and Sophia and Tessa and Jane to add final thoughts of any kind. And that's accounting for some folks who haven't spoken recently, but then I'll open it up to other final thoughts. So, Irene, do you have a final thought on this? Does it make you want to go back to Spain and collaborate with your chocolate-addicted friends?
Yeah, definitely. And I was just thinking about this setting of all of us kind of collaborating in the reading of your poem. It's already a good example. It's like, well, we've probably got a different understanding and a different reading of the poem. So.
Oh, metacritical reference. So, what we're doing is a collaboration. Why not? Sophia?
Well, Irene and I have actually collaborated, but across languages. She translated a poem of mine into Spanish.
And it had blueberries in it also.
Yeah, I did. And I feel like, it's a different kind of collaboration because translation is different a little bit. But I feel like collaboration is just like a heightened way to listen. And I feel like who doesn't need to listen better, Oh,
that's so nice. That's so nice. Tessa, final thought?
Yeah, I love collaboration because I think for me it's a wonderful way to allow myself to be kind of interrupted, which I feel is very important, and even tripped up. I quite like it if I'm writing something, then someone I'm collaborating with will respond in such a way and I think, no, and I kind of fall over and think that's not, but then you sort of, so it's that kind of process of being interrupted and caught off guard, I think, in your writing is a great thing. Yeah. Lovely.
Jane, final thought?
I think this collaboration between these amazing poets is, as the poem says, a kind of gender confetti. And Virginia Woolf so nice. Talks in A Room of One's Own about all great poets have androgynous minds, that there's an androgyny, and she has this image of a man and a woman getting into a taxi together, and that somehow poetry exceeds any one gender. And does androgyny mean just simply bringing together of two set genders, masculine and feminine, or does it open up a third gender or another, complicate and proliferate gender positions? And I think that by not identifying who is the author of each poem, that you get that idea of a duet of collaboration, but you also stop this pernicious gender binary, which is the dominant metaphor ruining all our lives. You know, that all our discourses are organised around master slave, man over woman, and there's something so liberating about a duet where when you meet somebody, the first thing you're thinking is not what gender you are, and when you meet the poem, you're not trying to ascribe it to one particular gendered person. The poems are, you know, by exploding into gender confetti, they're doing so much more for our models of what human beings are, what a subject is in the world. So that's what I think.
Thank you, Jane. I mean, you reminded us all that a lot is at stake, even when these two poets are having such a good time. Maria, Colin, I want to make sure you have a chance to say other things about this.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that Colin is kind of our Bernadette in a way. Like, Colin is, I think, you know, I've lost track of the amount of people who have said that Colin completely changed their idea of poetry and encouraged them and told them they were a poet when they were like, this is my flash fiction, I'm not sure about it. And just, yeah, I think has just been such a leading light for everyone in Scotland, especially in the Central Belt, whether that's through lecturing, running workshops, hosting so many events, and just being a really enthusiastic reader. Yeah. So I just wanted to, say thank you.
Yeah.
That's too sweet.
Wow. How are you going to follow that?
Yeah, I know, that is hard. That is pretty hard. Yeah, but like every poem in this book, that's too sweet. The collaborating on this book with Maria was amazing, and we're actually working on a second edition. But I just wanted to mention something about that, which is we slightly changed the model for the collaboration, and for me it kind of made me realise what was so important about the way that we did this. So for this new collaboration, we started just putting the poems up on a doc, whereas for this collaboration we were swapping them by email. And so in the new version, I feel like it was definitely much less kind of thrilling putting together the new version than this version, because it was just such a kind of delight when you've been hard at work all day or whatever, you know, stressed with various pressures and things, and then into your email pops a new poem from Maria and a new prompt in the form of a Ritter's Port chocolate bar, and that sense of exchange and correspondence and collaboration, which is obviously so much part of Bernadette Mair's poetics, was part of this and part of what Maria engendered with that initial gift. And I feel like this whole book to me is like a gift from Maria, but also like it celebrates the idea of poetry as a kind of gift and sharing.
Oh, that is perfect. Thank you both for being here to help us think through the poems, and also for the collaboration itself, and thank you all. This was really, really great. I think we should take our cold hands and put them together for these wonderful poets.